The painting will usually start with an idea of what it could be, and then oftentimes I'll try to like make a rough drawing and then begin to decide like what scale it should be, and then also I'll often mix paint for a while before starting to paint. But after that, then it's very open and direct. So, but oftentimes I'll like try to think of subjects that are not that are potentially difficult to depict, and it's not. So I think of them sometimes as an abstract, essentially an abstract subject that then you try to begin to represent pictorially, you know, or so that you try to then represent. So I think that sometimes they often come from language, and in the way that language can be very open, like a phrase or a set of words that can begin to open up a space that could begin to be a painting. There's a recent painting that I made that's called Midday, and it's almost like a still life of people in a boat. And I was trying to think about like how do you begin to depict almost nighttime in the day. So there's a figure that's almost sort of sleeping in the center of the picture, and everything else feels like it could be discordant, like within the boat. And then there's these sort of fish that are underneath that I just felt like there was kind of like the subconscious. But oftentimes they'll, it could come from a phrase, like there's a recent painting called Trouble in Appearance, and I thought about those words as just like, how do you begin to depict those as ideas, you know, like how, so I was thinking about a figure that maybe that was split off into two figures, and one was extremely, very much like an object or all about physicality, and the other figure was just like this almost horrible membrane that or like a figural windshield that was walking in front of the other figure, that it had to see the world through, and the world saw it through, but was always there. And I just thought that the man who was more of the object-y figure could be like a salesman, like dealt with objects and had to like drag this terrible roller bag across gravel and puddles, which had images of the sky or something. So it'll start like that, like a kind of just in a way where you start to think like, oh, well, how could you begin to depict this? Or like, what is this subject? Because sometimes I think the phrases that actually come more from a feeling, like how do you begin to depict a feeling? I think paintings are special because they can turn off. You know, they're different every time. They're different with every viewer, and they're different even with yourself when you look at them at different times and different places. And I think they often say more about us than they do about them. And so I think that they're special in this way, that they're always changing. Like they can continuously make and remake meaning if they're any good. So I think that that's a very special, necessary thing. It's hard to talk about things being necessary with art, they always feel like they should be necessary. But then I think in times that are really dire, there's always this question of like, why? Why make art? Or like, do something else with your time or something. But I think that there's, I think that it's important that they don't necessarily, paintings don't, I feel like that they behave differently at different times, and I think that that's interesting. And they mean things that are different to people at different times. I think paintings have always like a second subject, that there's the painting and the sort of subject that you can write down, that you can kind of title or what it is. But the actual, I think, real subject is way more open or diffuse and nebulous or is something that is maybe not quite nameable. And I think that that's maybe painting's power. I think that color is very physical, and it's always attached to light. And I think it can be evocative of qualities of the subject, and it's also, you can define space or work in space. So I think it depends on the painting, but I think it's something that's always, it has its own kind of language to it. I think there'll be an urgency to make, an urgency for a certain painting. And I think that, you can't really predict how the creative process is going to work, for lack of a better word, creative process. But I think it's like there's, sometimes you get more ideas than you know what to do with, and other times it feels like such a struggle, and you can't, you can't even begin to visualize what you would want to begin to do. I mean, different paintings are different, but I think there's always a sense of like a problem, or like finding like there's a problem, and then you feel like that's a reason to begin to try to make a painting, I think. And whatever that problem it could be very simple, or it could be not at all. So I just think it's I think that's the reason to paint.